The day I buried my husband of 40 years, they gave me 1 hour to pack a single bag. "Grieve, pack your bags and never come back home again," my daughter-in-law said, her eyes like ice. My own son, the boy I raised, just nodded. "The house was never really yours anyway," he told me with a shrug. "They thought they were leaving a broken old woman with nothing. They thought they had won. What they didn't know is that the very next day, I had a meeting at the bank. I walked in as a grieving widow with nowhere to go. I walked out as the sole trustee of the entire family fortune. They are now tenants in my house. He is the CEO of my company. And they are about to learn that revenge is a dish best served cold. This is the story of how I took back everything they stole from me and more. Follow my story for the next chapter. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think my first move should be." The scent of lilies was suffocating. For hours it clung to the air in our home, a sweet, cloying perfume of death. Friends and distant relatives murmured condolences, their hands patting my arm, their eyes filled with a pity I couldn't absorb. I was a ghost at my own husband's wake, floating through rooms that echoed with 40 years of his laughter, his booming voice, his quiet, steady presence. Now, there was only the scent of lilies and the hushed whispers of the living. Ryan, my son, stood by the fireplace, looking every bit the grieving heir in his tailored black suit. Beside him, his wife Brooke managed to look both somber and impeccable, a feat of social gymnastics I never managed to master. When the last car finally pulled away from the curb, a heavy silence descended. The quiet I had craved all day suddenly felt menacing. Brooke was the first to break it. She glided across the living room, her heels silent on the plush Aubusson rug Robert had bought me for our 25th anniversary. She placed a cool hand on my arm. "You must be exhausted, Carolyn." I nodded, too weary for words. I thought, for a foolish moment, that she was offering comfort. Her expression shifted then. The mask of practiced sympathy dissolved, revealing something hard and polished beneath. "Now that your husband is dead," she said, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, "grieve, pack your bags, and never come back home again." The words didn't register at first. They were nonsensical, a string of syllables that had no place in the world I knew. I pulled my arm away, my eyes darting to my son. "Ryan." He wouldn't meet my gaze. He simply stared at a point over my shoulder, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on his lips. He gave a slight nod, a small gesture that sealed my fate. "The house was never really yours anyway, Mom," he said, his voice casual, as if discussing the weather. "Dad made sure it went to me. It's in the will." Betrayal is a physical thing. It's a sharp, cold blade that slips between your ribs and twists. It stole the air from my lungs, leaving me gasping in the lily-scented silence. My husband of 4 decades was gone, and his son, my son, was casting me out of my life before the flowers on his grave had even had a chance to wilt. There was no fight in me. Not then. The shock was a heavy shroud, muffling all emotion save for a deep, hollow ache. Wordlessly, I turned and walked up the grand staircase, my hand trailing on the smooth oak banister Robert had sanded and stained himself. In our bedroom, I pulled a single suitcase from the top of the closet. "What do you take from a life you're leaving behind?" I packed the silver-framed photo from our wedding, Robert's worn leather-bound copy of Moby Dick, my mother's pearls. I added underwear, a few blouses, a pair of slacks. The rest, the clothes, the furniture, the memories embedded in the very walls, felt like they belonged to another woman. A woman whose life had not just ended, but been declared null and void. I walked out the front door without looking back. I drove until the manicured lawns of our neighborhood gave way to the garish neon of the highway. I checked into the first motel I saw, the Starlight Inn, a place whose name was far grander than its reality. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. The polyester bedspread was a nauseating shade of orange. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, the single suitcase at my feet, and the dam of my composure finally broke. The tears came, hot and silent. They weren't just for Robert anymore. They were for the life we built, the son we raised, and the devastating knowledge that the boy I loved had become a man I no longer recognized. I remembered Robert just a year ago, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Ryan worries me, Carolyn," he'd said, swirling the coffee in his mug. "He sees the business, the house, all of this. He sees it as a prize to be won, not a legacy to be honored." "He's just ambitious, dear," I'd replied, ever the peacemaker. Robert had looked at me then, his gaze heavy with a sadness I didn't understand. "I hope you're right," he'd said. "But I'm taking steps to make sure you're always taken care of." At the time I thought he meant life insurance. In the cold, lonely motel room, his words came back to me as a final, heartbreaking goodbye. Morning came, gray and unforgiving. The coffee from the in-room machine was a bitter, watery insult. I was staring at the cracked ceiling, trying to figure out what my next move was. A shelter? A call to my sister in Oregon? When my phone buzzed on the nightstand, it was a private number. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me answer. "Hello. Is this Mrs. Carolyn Sterling?" The voice was male, formal and brisk. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Arthur Coldwell. I was your husband's estate lawyer." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Mr. Coldwell. Yes, I remember you. Mrs. Sterling, I know this is a difficult time, but I must insist on a meeting. Today, if possible. It is of the utmost importance regarding the execution of Robert's final wishes. Can you be at the main branch of Meridian Trust and Bank at 2 o'clock? The request was so sudden, so demanding, it cut through the fog of my grief. "The bank? Why?" "It's all in the documentation, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Everything will be explained." 2 o'clock. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, a strange new feeling stirring in my gut. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was confusion, a single sharp question mark in a sea of sorrow. Robert's final wishes. What had my husband done? The Meridian Trust and Bank building was a monolith of glass and steel, designed to make you feel small. I walked in wearing the simple black dress I'd worn to the funeral, feeling out of place amongst the crisp suits and clicking heels. A severe-looking woman at the front desk directed me to the top floor. Mr. Caldwell was a tall, thin man with eyes that seemed to see everything. He led me into a polished boardroom with a panoramic view of the city. The view from my motel window had been a brick wall. "Thank you for coming on such short notice, Carolyn," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He opened a thick leather portfolio on the vast mahogany table between us. "As you know," he began, "Robert's will was filed yesterday. In it, he leaves the title of CEO of Sterling Dynamics to your son, Ryan. The deed to the family home on Oakwood Lane is also transferred to him." I flinched, the words a confirmation of my son's cruelty. "So it's true," I whispered. "On the surface, yes," Mr. Caldwell said, pausing to look me directly in the eye. "But Robert was a brilliant man. He played the long game. What Ryan and his wife do not yet realize is that they have inherited a kingdom with no treasury." He slid a document across the table. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "The Carolyn Sterling Legacy Trust." "Years ago," Mr. Caldwell explained, "Robert converted nearly every tangible asset he owned into this trust. The company's operating capital, all real estate holdings, including the campus where Sterling Dynamics is located and the house on Oakwood Lane, all stocks, all patents, everything of actual value. It's all in here." He tapped the document with his finger. "And, per Robert's explicit and unalterable instructions, you, Carolyn, are the sole trustee and beneficiary. You alone have absolute control." I stared at him, my mind struggling to keep up. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, a faint smile touching his lips, "that Sterling Dynamics cannot secure a loan, sell an asset, or even make payroll past 90 days without your signature. It means that your son and his wife are currently living in your house. And you, Mrs. Sterling, are their landlord." I left the bank in a daze. I walked for blocks, the city noise a dull roar in my ears. The world had tilted on its axis. One moment I was a destitute widow, the next I was something else entirely. Something powerful. My grief for Robert was still there, a heavy, aching weight in my chest. But now it was mingled with a profound, awestruck love. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't left me to the mercy of our son. He had seen the storm coming and had built me an ark. No, not an ark. He had built me a battleship. I stopped in front of a grand hotel, the Fairmont, its uniformed doorman tipping his hat to arriving guests. On impulse I walked inside. The lobby was a symphony of marble, gold, and quiet elegance. It smelled of money and clean, fresh air. I walked to the front desk. "I'd like your best suite, please," I said, my voice steadier than I thought possible. "The one with the city view." As I signed the registration, I used the new credit card Mr. Caldwell had given me, the one linked to the Carolyn Sterling Legacy Trust. The clerk slid the keycard across the counter with a respectful smile. Upstairs, in a suite larger than my first apartment, I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out below me like a blanket of glittering jewels. I thought of Ryan and Brooke in my house, celebrating their victory, oblivious to the fact that their world was now balanced on the tip of my pen. The grief remained. But standing there, high above the world that had tried to crush me, I felt a new emotion take root in the ashes of my old life. It was cold and clear and sharp as glass. It was resolve. Robert hadn't just left me protection. He had left me a weapon. And for his sake, for the sake of the legacy they sought to defile, I was going to learn how to use it. Living at the Fairmont was a statement, but it wasn't a home. After a week of splendid isolation, I asked Mr. Caldwell to arrange a meeting with a high-end realtor. I didn't want a house with a yard to mow and rooms to fill with ghosts. I wanted clean lines, security, and a view of the future, not the past. I found it in a glass-walled condominium on the 30th floor of a new downtown building. The space was minimalist, with white walls, light wood floors, and a sleek, modern kitchen. It was the complete antithesis of the sprawling, traditional home I had shared with Robert, and that's why I loved it. It was a blank canvas. It was mine. My days fell into a new rhythm. In the mornings, I would sit at a simple glass desk overlooking the city, a cup of strong black coffee in hand. Spread before me were the documents for the Carolyn Sterling Legacy Trust. At first, the legal and financial jargon was a dense forest. But with methodical patience, I began to chart a path. I highlighted clauses, made notes in the margins, and cross-referenced portfolios. I wasn't just reading, I was studying. I was learning the intricate design of the fortress Robert had built around me. And in doing so, I discovered the blueprints for its arsenal. The more I learned, the more the grieving, displaced woman I'd been began to feel like a distant memory, replaced by someone I was only just beginning to know. The sole trustee. Took 12 days. I was unpacking a box of books when my phone rang, displaying Ryan's name. I took a deep, steadying breath and answered, my voice even. "Hello, Ryan." "Mom," he said, the single word dripping with forced bonhomie. "I was worried. You disappeared. Where are you?" "I'm fine. I have a new place," I said, offering no further details. "Good, good," he said dismissively, getting straight to the point. "Listen, things are moving really fast at the company. I'm on the verge of a major breakthrough. A new R&D initiative that's going to revolutionize the industry. It's visionary." I recognized the buzzwords. They were the same ones he used when he wanted to buy a new sports car or a ridiculously expensive watch. "I need to fast-track the funding," he continued, his voice gaining momentum. "I need you to authorize a capital injection from the company's reserve accounts. It's about $2 million. Caldwell said you have to sign off on it." He laughed, a short, arrogant bark. "Just a ridiculous formality Dad set up." He spoke to me as if I were a child, someone who couldn't possibly grasp the brilliant complexities of his work and just needed to be told where to sign her name. He still saw the woman he'd kicked out of her home, not the woman who now owned it. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, savoring the weight of it. I pictured him in Robert's office, leaning back in Robert's chair, feet propped on Robert's desk, supremely confident. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a slammed door. The silence on the other end of the line was different now. It was no longer patient. It was shocked, offended. "What?" he finally sputtered. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no, I will not be authorizing the transfer of $2 million, I said, my voice as calm and cool as the glass of my new desk. "Pursuant to the bylaws of the trust, which I'm sure you haven't bothered to read, any capital expenditure of this magnitude requires a full proposal. I will need a comprehensive business plan, a 5-year market analysis, a risk assessment, and a complete third-party audit of Sterling Dynamics' current financials for my review." "An audit? Are you kidding me?" His voice was rising, a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Mom, this is my company now. You don't get to." "Ryan," I interrupted, my tone hardening just enough to cut through his tantrum. "You inherited a title. I control the assets. If you want funding, you will provide the documentation. Those are the new rules. Send the proposal to my lawyer when it's ready." I ended the call before he could respond. My hand was shaking slightly, but a fierce, exhilarating energy surged through me. It was the first battle, and I had not just held my ground. I had redrawn the map of the entire battlefield. A week later, I received a call from an old friend, Margaret, a woman with whom I'd served on charity boards for 20 years. "Carolyn, darling, I was so worried," she began, her voice a warm comfort. "Are you all right? We all missed you at Brooke's party." "I'm fine, Maggie. Just needed some time," I said. "How was the party?" Margaret sighed, a sound rich with gossip. "An absolute production, of course. Caterers, a string quartet, enough champagne to float a yacht. Brooke was holding court like the Queen of Sheba. But honestly, Carolyn, it was strange." "Strange how?" "Everyone was whispering, asking where you were. It felt wrong, holding a celebration like that in Robert's house so soon, and without you there. And the business crowd," she lowered her voice. "They were huddled in corners. I overheard Jack from Apex Industries asking Ryan about his supply chain, and Ryan got very defensive. People are nervous, Carolyn. They respected Robert. Ryan, he doesn't command that same confidence." I thanked her for the call, my mind racing. Brooke's desperate attempt to project power was backfiring. She was trying to light up the sky with fireworks, but everyone was noticing the foundation of the house was dark. The cracks in their perfect facade were already beginning to show. I didn't just wait for Ryan's proposal. I took the offensive. Following Mr. Caldwell's recommendation, I engaged a forensic accounting firm called Northbridge Financial, a discreet group of sharks known for finding what their clients didn't want found. I met with the 2 senior partners, a man and a woman who looked more like university professors than financial investigators. I laid out my request clearly. "I want a complete picture of Sterling Dynamics," I told them. "I want to know where every dollar has gone for the past 2 years. I'm particularly interested in executive expense accounts, discretionary spending, and any projects initiated by Ryan Sterling." They listened intently, asking sharp, insightful questions. They didn't treat me like a grieving widow. They treated me like a client, a CEO. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt truly seen. Within a week, their preliminary report landed in my secure email inbox. It was worse than I imagined. The document was a testament to waste and ego. There were invoices for Brooke's interior design consultations that were really just shopping sprees, a cancelled project for a corporate jet that had cost the company a massive non-refundable deposit, and a trail of vanity initiatives that led nowhere. As I read, my anger became cold and clear. This wasn't just my son's incompetence. It was a profound disrespect to every employee who worked hard for their paycheck, and a desecration of the company Robert had poured his life into building. My resolve hardened from a shield into a spear. This wasn't just about protecting a trust. It was about cleansing a legacy. Ryan never submitted a formal proposal. He believed he could outweight me, that my sudden display of backbone was a momentary lapse. He was wrong. Armed with the Northbridge financial report, I had Mr. Caldwell draft a formal letter. It was a masterpiece of cold, corporate precision. The letter, addressed to the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, officially rejected the verbal request for a $2 million capital injection, citing the preliminary audit which revealed a pattern of fiscal irresponsibility, a lack of strategic oversight, and the misallocation of company funds for personal expenditures. The same day the letter was delivered to Ryan's office by courier, I made a call to the trust's financial manager. "I'd like to place a temporary freeze on all executive expense accounts, effective immediately," I instructed, pending a full review of spending policies. 3 days later, my friend Margaret called, her voice fizzing with barely contained excitement. "Carolyn, you will not believe what happened. I was at Neiman Marcus, and Brooke Sterling was there, holding court at the handbag counter. She tried to buy a new Birkin bag. Honestly, who needs another one? And her card was declined. Not once but twice. You could have heard a pin drop. She went pale, then red, and practically ran out of the store. I listened, a cool satisfaction settling over me. The first squeeze was a success. Humiliation, I was learning, was a far more effective tool than anger. With their personal slush fund cut off, it was time to address their largest asset, or as I now saw it, their largest liability. I met with Mr. Caldwell in his office. "They believe they won the house, Arthur," I said, looking out his window at the city below. "They need to understand they won nothing but an obligation." He nodded, a flicker of admiration in his professional gaze. "What do you have in mind, Carolyn?" "I want to treat it as any other property in the trust's portfolio. I want you to draw up a formal lease agreement." The next day, another crisp envelope arrived at my old home. Inside, Ryan and Brooke found a legally binding rental agreement. It stated that as occupants of the property at 42 Oakwood Lane, an asset of the Carolyn Sterling Legacy Trust, they would henceforth be subject to monthly rent, calculated at the current fair market rate of $12,000. The document politely informed them that this amount would be automatically deducted from the CEO's monthly salary. I had trapped them. They were living in a monument to their own greed, and now I was charging them for the privilege. They couldn't move without admitting social and financial defeat, and they couldn't stay without paying me, their estranged mother, for the roof over their heads. Their castle had become their cage. The lease agreement broke Brooke's composure completely. The intercom in my condo buzzed violently, and the doorman's flustered voice announced that a Mrs. Sterling is in the lobby and is being insistent. I told him to send her up. She burst into my apartment without an invitation, her face a mask of rage, her designer dress practically trembling with her fury. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice echoing in my quiet living room. "This is harassment. You are a bitter, vengeful old woman." I calmly closed the door behind her. "Hello, Brooke. Would you care for some iced tea?" My placid response seemed to enrage her further. "Don't you patronize me. You are trying to ruin us." "No," I said, my voice dangerously soft. I walked over to my desk and picked up a slim folder, a summary of the Northbridge report. "You two have already done a remarkable job of that on your own. I'm just balancing the books." I fanned the pages out on my coffee table. Invoices for her design services, receipts from lavish vacations booked as corporate retreats, the 6-figure penalty for the private jet debacle. "This is what's ruining you, Brooke. This waste. This theft." She stared at the papers, speechless for the first time. Her rage faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "You came into my home on the day of my husband's funeral and threw me out," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "You thought you were taking over a bank. You just failed to realize that I am the banker, the vault, and the key. And the bank, Brooke, is now closed." She recoiled as if I had slapped her, then turned and fled my apartment without another word. The pressure I was applying was having an effect inside the walls of Sterling Dynamics. 2 weeks after my confrontation with Brooke, I received a discreet email from a man named George Peterson. I knew him well. George had been Robert's first hire, a brilliant engineer who had risen to become the senior VP of operations. He was fiercely loyal, not to the title of CEO, but to the man who had built the company. He asked to meet somewhere public but private. We met in a quiet corner of the city's botanical garden. George looked tired, his face etched with worry. "Carolyn, thank you for meeting me," he said, clutching a manila envelope. "I can't stand by and watch what he's doing to Robert's company." "What is he doing, George?" "He's trying to sell off the patent for the Gen 3 semiconductor," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's the core of our entire product line for the next decade. He's arranged a secret deal with a foreign competitor. They'll buy the patent, he'll get a massive personal payout wired to an offshore account, and Sterling Dynamics will be left with nothing but outdated technology. He's planning to gut the company and walk away a rich man, leaving hundreds of employees with nothing." He pushed the envelope across the small table. "It's all in there. Copies of the emails, the wire transfer instructions he sent from his personal account, the draft of the sale agreement. It's fraud, Carolyn. Plain and simple." I took the envelope. Its weight felt immense. This was no longer about mismanagement. This was a criminal conspiracy. George had just handed me the executioner's sword. I called the meeting in the same boardroom at Meridian Trust and Bank where my new life had begun. It was just the three of us. Me, a stone-faced Mr. Caldwell, and a visibly unnerved Ryan, who clearly had no idea what was coming. "Thank you for coming, Ryan," I began, my hands folded calmly on the table. "We have a serious matter to discuss regarding your stewardship of Sterling Dynamics." "If this is about that ridiculous rent," he started, his voice full of bluster. Mr. Caldwell cut him off. "I advise you to listen, Mr. Sterling." I said nothing. I simply opened the manila envelope from George and laid its contents on the polished table, one by one. An email chain discussing the patent sale. A draft of a contract with the competitor's name on it. A copy of a swift instruction for a payment of $10 million to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. Ryan's face drained of all color. The arrogant smirk he wore like a second skin melted away, revealing the terrified young man underneath. He stared at the papers, his mouth slightly agape. He was caught. I leaned forward. "You have two options," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Option A. You will sign this letter of resignation, effective immediately. You will vacate my house within 30 days. In return, the trust will grant you a one-time severance payment of $100,000, and this matter will be handled internally. You will walk away with your freedom, if not your dignity." I paused, letting the offer sink in. "Then there is option B," I continued, tapping the pile of evidence. "You refuse. And Mr. Caldwell walks these documents across the street to the district attorney's office. You will be prosecuted for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You will lose everything, Ryan. And you will almost certainly go to prison." I sat back in my chair. "The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes." I watched my son's face cycle through a storm of emotions. Disbelief, panic, and finally, a flicker of cunning that turned my stomach. The 5 minutes I gave him stretched into 10. He stared at the damning evidence on the boardroom table, his jaw working silently. I expected a plea, an outburst, a negotiation. I did not expect the chilling smile that slowly spread across his lips. "I need to think," he said, pushing his chair back. "I need to talk to my wife." He stood up and walked out of the room with a composure so false it was practically screaming. Mr. Caldwell looked at me, his brow furrowed. "He's not going to take the deal." "I know," I said, a cold certainty settling in my bones. "He's going to do something foolish." The call came 2 days later. It wasn't from Ryan, but from the Vice President of Security at Meridian Trust and Bank. "Mrs. Sterling," the man said, his voice grave. "We're calling to report a flagged transaction on the Legacy Trust. An urgent request was submitted this morning to liquidate a stock portfolio valued at $500,000 and transfer the funds to a private account. The digital signature on the authorization form was yours, but it failed our biometric verification protocol. It was a forgery. My breath hitched. In his desperation, Ryan had chosen a third option: self-destruction. He had tried to steal from the trust, a desperate, clumsy move by a cornered animal. Robert's foresight, the layered security protocols he'd insisted on, had been his final gift to me. It was the last lock on the fortress door, and my son had just tried to smash it with a hammer. Mr. Caldwell's response was swift and merciless. He called Ryan directly. I was in his office as he made the call, listening on speakerphone. "Ryan," Mr. Caldwell said, his voice devoid of any warmth, "we are aware of your attempt to fraudulently liquidate assets from the trust this morning." The silence on the other end was heavy with guilt. "As a result of this criminal act," Mr. Caldwell continued, "Option A is permanently off the table. The offer of a severance and a quiet resignation has been rescinded. The choice is no longer yours to make." "Wait, Arthur, I can explain." Ryan's voice was a panicked squeak, the arrogance stripped away completely. "No, you cannot," Mr. Caldwell stated flatly. "You have made your position and your character unequivocally clear. I will be convening an emergency meeting of the Sterling Dynamics Board of Directors for tomorrow morning. You will be in attendance. We will be discussing your immediate termination for cause, as well as the evidence of conspiracy to commit corporate fraud and your attempted wire fraud. I suggest you find a lawyer. Goodbye." He hung up the phone. The game was over. I didn't feel the thrill of victory I might have expected. I felt a profound, weary sadness. I had given my son a chance to escape with his future intact, and he had thrown it into a fire of his own making. The path forward was now clear, and it was a path I had to walk to the end. The Sterling Dynamics boardroom was frigid with tension. The board members, men and women who had respected Robert, looked at Ryan with expressions ranging from pity to pure contempt. He sat at the head of the table, his father's seat, looking small and pale. With Mr. Caldwell by my side, I did not raise my voice. I simply presented the facts. I began with the Northbridge financial audit, detailing the gross mismanagement of funds. I moved on to George Peterson's dossier, laying out the irrefutable proof of Ryan's plot to sell the company's core patent. Finally, I concluded with the bank's official report on his attempted forgery. It was a systematic dismantling of his character and his career. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the room. The chairman of the board cleared his throat. "In light of this overwhelming evidence, a motion is on the floor for the immediate termination of Ryan Sterling as CEO for gross misconduct and malfeasance." It was seconded instantly. The vote was unanimous. "Ryan," the chairman said, "please vacate the premises." He stood, his face ashen, and walked out of the room without looking at anyone. The door clicked shut behind him. In the vacuum he left, I addressed the board one last time. "This company was my husband's life's work," I said, my voice strong. "It deserves a leader who understands that legacy. I use my authority as sole trustee to nominate George Peterson as the new Chief Executive Officer of Sterling Dynamics, effective immediately." A wave of relief and approval washed through the room. They knew George. They trusted him. The motion passed in seconds. Robert's legacy was finally safe. A month later, I drove down Oakwood Lane one last time. A moving truck was parked in the driveway of my old home. Its ramp extended to the front door. I walked up the stone path just as Brooke was carrying a box of designer shoes to the truck. She froze when she saw me, her face a pinched mask of resentment. Ryan came to the doorway. He looked gaunt, diminished. The tailored suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. They were moving into a small rental apartment across town, their assets frozen pending the outcome of the DA's investigation. "What do you want?" Ryan asked, his voice hollow. "Come to gloat." I looked past him, at the foyer where I had raised him, at the staircase he'd descended on his first prom night. "I came to say goodbye to the house," I said simply. Pathetic whimper escaped Brooke. "Please, Carolyn," she begged, the word mom conspicuously absent. "Don't do this. We have nothing." I turned my gaze to my son, the boy whose face I once knew better than my own. You had everything, Ryan, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. You had your father's legacy, his name, his company. You had a home. And you threw it all away. I met his empty eyes. You were right about one thing, I said, the words falling like chips of ice into the space between us. The house was never really yours anyway. I turned my back on them, on the life I'd had there, and walked to my car without looking back. As I drove away, I didn't feel triumph, nor did I feel sadness. I felt the quiet, clean peace of a chapter finally, irrevocably closed. 6 months later, I sat in a bright, airy office. My office. A plaque on the door read, "The Robert Sterling Foundation for Senior Advocacy." After selling the house on Oakwood Lane, I had used every penny of the proceeds to establish this. We provided pro bono legal aid and emergency housing grants to elderly people who were being exploited or abandoned by their families. Sterling Dynamics, under George Peterson's steady hand, was thriving. He had not only saved the company but had implemented a new profit-sharing program for all employees, truly honoring the spirit Robert had intended. My phone buzzed with a message from Margaret, asking if I was free for lunch. My calendar was full, but it was a good kind of full, filled with purpose. The news reported that Ryan had taken a plea deal, avoiding prison time but receiving a decade of probation and a permanent ban from serving as an officer of any public company. He and Brooke had faded into obscurity. I looked out my window at the people walking in the park across the street. The heavy cloak of grief and betrayal was gone. In its place was a quiet strength I never knew I possessed. The revenge had not been the point. It had been the process. It was the fire I had to walk through to burn away the woman who was a victim and forge the woman I was meant to be. I was not just Robert Sterling's widow. I was Carolyn Sterling, the guardian of his legacy, and the architect of my own. And for the first time in a long time I was looking forward to tomorrow. And so, my revenge is complete. The empire my husband built is safe, and from the ashes of their greed, I've built a new foundation to help others. My peace is my victory. But now I have to ask you. I gave them a chance to walk away. They chose crime and faced the consequences. Was that enough? Let me know in the comments below. Type justice if you think letting them fade into their own miserable failure was the perfect revenge. Or type ruin if you think I should have gone further and made absolutely sure they lost everything, down to the very last dime. I can't wait to see what you would have done. Thanks for following my story.